Triple H's creative takeover of WWE in 2022 was the dawn of a new era. After years of Vince McMahon's tightly gripped chaotic control, fans saw Triple H's ascension to the head of creative as a long-awaited shift, with a renewed focus on in-ring action and long-term storytelling, and at the time, it felt like wrestling was back. And WWE's current financial business may certainly be reflecting that. But was this all just a honeymoon period of fan optimism? Are the cracks starting to form in WWE's current creative regime? Well, that is what we are here to find out today. You're watching Sportskeeda Wrestling, my name is Liam, and today we're taking a look at the rise and fall of Triple H as WWE's booker. But before we go any further, why not hit subscribe and click the little bell icon to be notified first about all of our latest videos? It will help us out a lot on our push to 200,000 subscribers, and we'd be very grateful. Thank you, and on with the video. When Triple H first took over creative duties, shows felt fresher, commentary teams were looser, the term wrestler was no longer banned, championships, particularly the Intercontinental and US titles, seemed to matter again. There was an energy running through WWE programming, amplified when Triple H began rehiring released superstars, let go during the pandemic era cuts, and Vince McMahon's creative regime. Names like Carryan Cross, Bray Wyatt, Braun Strowman, Dakota Kai, Hit Row, Johnny Gargano, Tegan Knox, Bronson Reed, Candice LeRae, Dexter Lumis, and more returned to WWE, and in many cases, with a bang. These were wrestlers who had thrived under Triple H's leadership in NXT, and the belief was that if they worked in any way during the NXT Black and Gold era, they could find renewed life on the main roster. But in 2025, some of that optimism is dropping off. Despite some clear successes, most notably Gunther's World Heavyweight title reign and Cody Rhodes finally finishing his story, WWE's week-to-week programming though has been a little bit flat. Creatively stagnant perhaps, or at absolute worst, boring. Raw in particular has been accused of being overly reliant on rematches, but even they have lost the momentum they had during the peak of the Bloodline. The cracks are beginning to show in the handling of returning stars, the very wrestlers that Triple H himself seemed to vouch for. Carryan Cross, positioned as a main eventer in NXT, made a huge return in August 2022, attacking Drew McIntyre and teasing a feud with Roman Reigns. He had the look, the entrance, the aura, but WWE hasn't translated it into compelling television. He lost key matches, led a disappointing faction, and slowly faded into the background. Despite some repackaging attempts and good promo work, he hasn't exactly gained the big traction WWE had hoped yet. And with his contract coming up at time of recording, he may soon be leaving the company once again. Although he is apparently shifting some merch in 2025, Bray Wyatt's return, heavily teased with a groundbreaking viral campaign involving QR codes and the White Rabbit mystery, was one of the most exciting creative choices of the Triple H era. Fans were intrigued by the slow burn storytelling, the cinematic presentation, and the return of a beloved star. However, the follow-through let the Eater of Worlds down. His feud with LA Knight was burdened by cheap gimmickry, like the much derided Mountain Dew Pitch Black match, which was unfortunately the last match of Bray Wyatt's career. Uncle Howdy was indeed interesting, but weeks turned into months without progression in his story before Bray once again vanished from TV. Tragically, Bray Wyatt passed away in August 2023, cutting short a legendary career and what might have been something special in this story. WWE are carrying on his legacy though, with the massively underutilized Wyatt 6, who they finally seem to be doing something with in 2025. Hit Row was another swing and a miss, reuniting to little fanfare without their original leader Swerve Strickland, who was now in AEW. They lacked direction, they were rarely featured, and eventually disbanded again by the end of 2024. Another high-profile rehire in Braun Strowman came back with his usual explosive power, but his return felt more like a retread, and fans had seen it all before. He didn't evolve, aside from his brief tag team pairing with Ricochet, who himself would leave the company soon after, with Braun doing little of note before a devastating injury once again sidelined him. Despite some early excitement, he quickly slipped back into the old Braun we knew before his release in 2025. We've got a whole ass video on the topic, which you can watch after this one. Then there's the case of Dakota Kai and the Damage Control faction as a whole. Dakota's return at SummerSlam 2022 alongside Bayley and Io Sky did feel like a big deal. Their faction was supposed to give Bayley a fresh coat of paint and get the two up-and-comers over with the audience, but they struggled to find chemistry despite multiple tag title wins. They never felt like what they were supposed to be, derailed by injuries and inconsistent booking, though Io has gotten some reigns as women's champion off the back of the group, which is great for her. Dakota Kai's presence dwindled, however, and she was released in 2025. Johnny Gargano, who was the heart and soul of NXT, returned with high expectations, and while some of his initial segments were entertaining, they did little to establish him as a serious contender. He faded out after a little while until finding a resurgence in SmackDown's tag team division, reuniting with Tommaso Ciampa's DIY for a successful tag team run. Gargano's wife, Candice LeRae, also made her return but has rarely been featured. So many of these stories do point to a broader issue. What began as a creative reset has simply become creative cautiousness, often leading to an uninspired product. Triple H's storytelling style, which relies heavily on slow builds and long-term planning, is starting to feel a little too safe, especially with a 3-hour Raw. Fans could do with some immediate payoffs and some higher energy. Weeks seem to go by without any story progression, stars are cycled in and out with no explanation, feuds often begin and end without closure or are dragged out forever. It all feels a bit Vince McMahon-like. Triple H's WWE can often feel reserved, with predictable match outcomes, overuse of backstage segments, and a lack of fresh matchups. This has made 5 hours of Raw and SmackDown week to week a hard thing to get excited about. Some fans also accuse Triple H of prioritizing his personal favorites, with ongoing debates on his current booking of said stars. Rhea Ripley is a prime example, one of WWE's most consistent performers. Some online have claimed that Triple H is shoving her down our throats. This criticism, though vocal, misses the point completely. Rhea Ripley's dominance isn't and hasn't been the problem. What these fans are frustrated about is the lack of challenges and meaningful stories that she has. And this is true of the entire roster. This creative fatigue has likely been worsened by internal shifts in WWE's corporate structure, with TKO Group Holdings now overseeing the whole thing. Triple H kept his job as chief content officer, but it became increasingly clear that he wasn't the only voice in the room. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, for example, joined the TKO board in 2024, and his involvement and influence in the product has raised questions about who is really steering the ship. WWE planned a Rock vs Roman Reigns storyline in early 2024, but Cody Rhodes eventually got his crowning moment instead due to a fan outcry, nixing the rumored plans to feature The Rock vs Roman in the main event. So that means that The Rock was fully willing to insert himself into the Bloodline saga, bringing a Hollywood presence to WWE's biggest faction. While some fans would no doubt have welcomed the Great One's star power, a lot of others felt it would have undermined the organic storytelling that the Bloodline had been known for up until that point. But because The Rock wanted to be part of it, who's going to tell him no? He's on the board of directors and he's one of the biggest actors in the world. He can do what he likes. So as of mid-2025, WWE is at a creative crossroads. The company is commercially successful and fan engagement is still high, while the week-to-week product has certainly regressed. Repetitive matchups and overextended angles, blah blah blah, you know the story by now. Triple H's reign hasn't crashed and burned in spectacular fashion, it's just lost a lot of the shine it had in its early days. The Paul Levesque era, as Stephanie McMahon called it at WrestleMania a couple of years ago, began with all the promise in the world. But what we have now is something a little more complicated, and a very creatively cautious WWE, where the roster is bloated with talent, yet too few stars get the chance to shine on television, all the while feeling overly produced, and if we're being honest, like a giant advertisement at times. These are feeling like problems from the Vince era, presenting themselves in the modern day. Maybe they're indicative of issues with the wider wrestling industry, or maybe it's just a problem with how WWE conducts business nowadays. But in the end, you find yourself asking the question, when their business is good and they're making this much money, why would they ever think there's a problem at all? And that's it for another video. Has WWE's creative gotten stale? Are we completely wrong? Let us know all that and more down in the comment section. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sportskeeda Wrestling to see more content like this. And why not enable notifications too? That way you will never miss a video when it drops. You've been watching Sportskeeda Wrestling. I've been Liam, and we will see you in the next one.